Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life.
In the 1950s, the U.S. government told your grandparents that if they saw the flash of an atomic bomb,
Just, the literal flash of a nuclear weapon.
right, that they could survive by hiding under a wooden school desk.
Right.
Or, and this is my favorite, maybe pulling a daily newspaper over their heads.
Yeah, a newspaper to block severe radiation burns.
I mean, think about that image for a second. The daily newspaper as a shield against nuclear Armageddon. It's just absurd.
It really is.
But meanwhile, those exact same politicians, the military leaders, they were quietly building a secret, spring-loaded city deep inside a mountain for themselves.
Exactly. Just for the elite.
So today, our deep dive is pulling back the curtain on what I think is the ultimate Cold War betrayal. We're heading into a highly classified U.S. government installation you might know it as Raven Rock.
And the contrast here is just absolutely staggering because on one hand, you have this manufactured, almost forced peacetime tranquility of the 1950s atomic age, right?
Oh yeah, the manicured lawns.
The lawns, the civil defense drills, all of it. But on the other hand, you have the grim concrete and steel reality of the people in charge actually anticipating the end of civilization.
Yeah.
And we are drawing today on a phenomenal transcript from a Vice-E TV documentary. It features unprecedented insider testimony. I mean, it gives us a literal blueprint of this shadow world.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because we are looking at a stark, honestly chilling divide here.
Yeah.
Between the illusion of safety sold to the American public and the very real shadow government preparing for doomsday beneath our feet.
Right.
But before we get into the psychology of all that, I really want to understand the physical space first.
Sure.
Because when you hear the word bunker, your mind immediately goes to like a reinforced concrete basement.
Right.
With some canned beans and a hand crank radio.
Right, a prepper basement.
Yeah. So how extreme was this facility actually?
Well, we have to completely discard the idea of a basement. To really grasp the gravity of Raven Rock, you need to leave that sunny 1950s suburb and physically descend into the earth. I mean, the sheer physical scale and the engineering of this facility tell you exactly how seriously the threat of total nuclear annihilation was taken.
Just by looking at the blueprints.
Exactly. Raven Rock was carved out of solid granite. It sits 768 feet below the surface of the mountain.
Wait, hold on. Let me pause you right there. 768 feet.
Yep, deep in the bedrock.
That is essentially a 70-story skyscraper buried upside down in solid rock. I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around the excavation alone, let alone making it habitable for human beings.
And the depth is just the beginning, honestly. Getting inside is an engineering marvel all its own. According to the documentary sources, the very first thing you encounter at the entrance is a massive glass door.
Glass.
Yeah, but we aren't talking about like an architectural storefront pane here. This single door is 3.5 feet thick, and it weighs 30 tons.
A 30-ton glass door. That sounds like a prop from a science fiction movie.
It really does.
How does a human being even operate a door that weighs as much as a commercial airplane?
Yeah.
Especially in the middle of a screaming end-of-the-world emergency.
Well, it requires an incredible amount of specialized hydraulic engineering just to balance the hinges so it can be sealed shut before a blast wave hits the mountain.
That is insane.
And that 30-ton door is merely the outer shell.
Right, there's more.
Oh, yeah. From there, you enter a massive airlock system. You pass through a second door of immense scale, which is designed to completely seal the internal environment from the radioactive surface.
Okay, so you're locked in.
Right, but once you pass through that second door, you still aren't even in the bunker. You have to walk another half a mile.
You're kidding.
No, you are walking a half mile deeper into the mountain tunnel just to reach the facility itself.
So you make that long, echoing half-mile walk, knowing the 30-ton doors have just sealed shut behind you. When you finally get to the end of that tunnel, what are you actually looking at?
You are looking at an entire subterranean municipality.
A whole city.
Essentially, yeah. Don Campbell, who spent 3.5 years at Raven Rock as part of the president's communication team, provided some incredible insider details for this documentary.
Oh, that's right. He was stationed down there.
Exactly. And he described seeing 5 massive freestanding buildings down there. Like, they aren't just random cinder block structures. They were specifically designed to represent the 5 rings of the Pentagon.
The actual Pentagon.
Yes. Each of these 5 buildings is 3 stories tall, and each floor contains somewhere between 50 to 80 offices.
That is massive. I mean, they essentially built an underground clone of the Pentagon inside a cavern.
They did. And what's fascinating here is the reasoning behind that design.
Okay.
Because this wasn't just designed to be a holding pen for survivors to ride out the fallout. The architecture perfectly mirrors the Pentagon because the goal wasn't merely survival. The goal was the continuous command and execution of a nuclear war.
I see.
Right. When military planners rushed down there, they needed the environment to be instantly familiar. They needed muscle memory to take over.
So they wouldn't miss a beat.
Exactly. The layout had to be instantly operational so they could continue fighting a global war from inside a mountain.
I am struggling with the physics of this, though. Like, let's say a 20-megaton Soviet warhead detonates directly on top of the mountain.
Yeah.
Doesn't the sheer seismic force of a nuclear blast just crush the cave?
You would think so, yeah, right.
How does a multi-story city survive the mountain literally exploding around it?
Right.
And the detail in the source material that absolutely blew my mind here is that the entire subterranean city,
The springs.
yeah, these massive 3-story office buildings, they're mounted on springs.
The structural engineering is just staggering. Yes, the buildings are literally resting on massive industrial-grade shock absorbers.
It's unbelievable.
Because when a nuclear weapon detonates, it creates a seismic shockwave, right? It travels through the bedrock like a localized earthquake. If those buildings were rigidly attached to the floor of the cavern, the kinetic energy from the blast would transfer directly into the structures. It would just shatter the concrete and collapse the buildings instantly.
So it's like an analogy I was thinking of earlier. It's like a giant, high-tech ant farm built inside a mountain,
Yeah.
but designed as this massive subterranean shock absorber.
That's a great way to put it.
You drop a nuke on the surface, the kinetic energy ripples through the granite, and the whole city inside just sways and bounces instead of breaking.
Right.
It's literally built to physically ride out the seismic wave of the end of the world.
That is the exact mechanism. They engineered a way to dissipate the kinetic energy of an atomic fireball. But, solving the physics of the blast wave logically leads us to the next, much more complicated problem.
Which is the people.
Exactly. You've built a shock-absorbing underground Pentagon. The Earth stops shaking. Now what?
Yeah.
You have a sealed mountain and thousands of panicked humans inside. How does this place not become a tomb on day 2 or day 20?
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting. The logistics of human survival down there are just surreal.
Absolutely.
According to the sources, Raven Rock had the capacity to feed 3,000 people. 3 meals a day. During a 30-day continuous lockdown,
30 days.
they had a massive common cafeteria to handle this. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of one of those staff members for a second. Imagine 3,000 people essentially trapped in a sealed box for a month,
Just waiting.
lining up with trays for their daily rations, knowing the surface of the Earth is just radioactive ash.
And supporting a population of 3,000 in a closed ecosystem requires vast infrastructure. I mean, the documentary outlines how they had massive subterranean water reservoirs,
Right.
their own internal power generators, full medical facilities, and even a functional post office to route communications.
A post office.
It really was a self-contained municipality.
The psychological dissonance of the amenities is what really gets under my skin, though.
Oh, for sure.
Because on one hand, you have a barbershop in there, but it only has exactly one chair.
Just one.
And on the other hand, just down the hall or in the next sector, they had a built-in crematorium ready if needed. I just can't get over the contrast between getting a trim and burning the dead.
It's dark, but it highlights the absolute cold pragmatism of the military planning.
Yeah.
Because you need to maintain a semblance of morale and routine to keep a command structure functioning, right?
Things normal.
Hence the barbershop. But you also have to deal with the grim biological reality of 3,000 people living under unimaginable stress. People are going to have heart attacks.
Of course.
People might arrive with lethal doses of radiation before those doors close. And in a sealed environment, you cannot bury the dead.
You can't just go outside.
No, you have to manage sanitation and disease immediately. Hence the crematorium.
It's just, think about the mental state of the people working there. You were sitting in that single-chair barbershop, getting a routine military fade. You're eating cafeteria food, knowing full well that millions of people, probably your own family members, are dying or already dead above ground.
That's a nightmare.
And at the exact same time, There is a totally different reality happening for the absolute upper echelon of this bunker.
Oh, the VIP section?
Yeah, Don Campbell's testimony gave us a look into the presidential suite, which served as the ultimate VIP room for the apocalypse.
Yeah, and access to the presidential area was highly restricted, as you would expect. Campbell noted that the other 3,000 people working in the site had absolutely no access to it.
None at all.
And they were incredibly curious about what was happening behind those specific doors.
Well, what was behind those doors was an entirely different standard of living. I mean, the presidential bedroom wasn't a standard military cot. It had a king-size bed. There was a separate private kitchen set up specifically to feed the 30 or 40 people in the president's inner circle. They were dining completely sequestered away from the 3,000 people eating in the common cafeteria.
Because even at the end of the world, hierarchy and status remain entirely intact.
Apparently so.
The stratification of society doesn't just evaporate because you are 768 feet underground. The commander-in-chief cannot be standing in a cafeteria line. The chain of command requires physical separation.
Okay, but the wildest part of the presidential suite to me was the war room.
Oh, the window.
Yes. The president's private office featured this one-way glass window looking down into a duplicate of the Pentagon war room where the staff was working.
Yeah. Campbell mentioned that the military personnel working the displays and the maps in the war room would look up, but they couldn't see through the glass.
They just saw a mirror.
Exactly. They knew they were being watched by the commander-in-chief, but the president remained entirely invisible to them.
It's like a theater director watching a play unfold from a darkened, soundproof booth. Just observing the end of the world through a one-way mirror. It feels intensely isolating. Like, why deliberately design it that way? Why put a physical barrier between the leader and the people executing the orders?
Well, the psychology behind that one-way glass is actually profound. The military planners understood the crushing emotional burden of command during a nuclear exchange.
Right.
The person making the decision to launch retaliatory strikes that will end millions of lives, they need to be insulated from the immediate human distress of the staff in the room.
So they don't break down.
Exactly. The glass allows the leader to observe the raw data and the strategic board without having to look their subordinates in the eyes while making civilization-ending decisions.
Man, that paints an incredibly bleak picture of leadership.
It really does.
You really have to ask yourself, why did it have to be built this way? Why this extreme level of secrecy, this rapid response shadow structure?
Well, to understand the necessity of a place like Raven Rock, you have to look at the brutal mathematical reality of the Cold War. The design of this bunker was a direct response to a very specific shift in global conflict.
Right, the timeline.
As the documentary transcript points out, we have to rewind to the 1950s.
Because we often look back at the 1950s as America's golden age of prosperity,
Yes.
right? But it was simultaneously the dawn of a ruthless, existential fight for global supremacy between the United States and the Soviet Union.
Absolutely. Both nations were rapidly developing arsenals of spectacularly powerful atomic weapons, and more importantly, the technology to deliver them across the globe.
The delivery systems were the game changer.
Yes. The invention of the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, or ICBM, it fundamentally broke the traditional mechanics of warfare.
How so?
Well, historically, a world war, like World War I or World War II, would last for years.
Right.
It required massive industrial mobilization, shipping troops across oceans, long, drawn-out campaigns.
Right. It took time to build up.
Exactly. But the atomic bomb paired with the ICBM meant that the next world war would not be measured in years. It would be decided in minutes.
Minutes. I mean, the government anticipated that if a Soviet strike was launched over the North Pole, there might be as little as 15 minutes of notice before the warheads detonated on American soil.
15 minutes.
Just 15 minutes to detect the launch, verify it wasn't a radar glitch, brief the president, and realize civilization as you know it is about to be wiped out.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you start to see why the traditional mechanisms of a democratic government suddenly became obsolete.
Oh, completely.
The Eisenhower administration realized that a 15-minute window does not allow for a session of Congress. It does not allow for debate. The traditional checks and balances of a republic are simply too slow to function in the atomic age.
So they initiated this elaborate process called continuity of government, or COG.
COG, right.
The entire point of the COG plan was to create a system where, if a strike happened, a secondary shadow government was completely ready to take over at a moment's notice. They deliberately engineered a system to eliminate any sort of layers of review or approval.
Because when you only have 15 minutes, democracy is a liability.
Wow.
Debate takes time. Review takes time. They needed a pre-packaged, push-button shadow government with pre-delegated authority. If the Capitol is vaporized, someone in Raven Rock instantly assumes control and can launch a retaliatory strike without consulting anyone.
Let me pause you there, because that is an incredibly sobering thought.
It is.
They created a system designed to completely bypass all normal democratic review for the sake of speed. Like, who actually pushes the button if the elected leaders are gone? It makes you wonder, did the continuity of government plan actually ensure the survival of the nation as a democratic republic? Or did it just guarantee mutual destruction while an unelected military elite survived in a spring-loaded mountain?
And that is the ultimate paradox of the Cold War. To protect the nation, the government built a secondary system that operated completely outside the view, the consent, and the control of the nation's citizens.
Without anyone knowing.
The primary objective shifted from saving the population to saving the mechanism of the state. And the lengths they went to in order to protect that state mechanism stand in horrifying contrast to the advice they were actively feeding the public during that exact same time period.
Yes. This is the part of the deep dive that really hits home for me. Because while the shadow government was pouring billions of dollars into 30-ton glass doors, underground cafeterias, and spring-loaded offices, what were they telling the average family?
Or pick and cover.
Exactly. They rolled out this massive nationwide civil defense program.
Yeah, we know them as the duck and cover generation.
The government was actively running campaigns telling everyday citizens that they could survive a nuclear war if they just prepared properly. They pushed the idea of digging backyard fallout shelters, stocking them with bottled water and prescription drugs. The core message broadcast into living rooms was that everyday Americans could go on living their lives and survive the unthinkable as long as they came together in unquestioning unity.
Unquestioning unity. But the propaganda was astonishingly optimistic, entirely divorced from the physics of the weapons involved.
Completely divorced.
The source material highlights one civil defense film that claimed even a thin piece of cloth it could protect a family from the thermal flash of a nuclear detonation.
A piece of cloth.
They actually told the public that a newspaper, a literal daily paper you read at the breakfast table, could save you from severe radiation burns if you simply held it over your head.
So what does this all mean? Put yourself in the shoes of an average citizen back then.
Right.
You were trusting your leaders. You're dutifully telling your children to practice hiding under their wooden school desks. You are seriously internalizing the idea that holding a newspaper over your face will block an atomic fireball.
It's tragic.
And all the while, the very people filming those public service announcements are retreating behind hydraulic airlocks and half-mile tunnels into a mountain bunker built on industrial springs.
And this raises an important question about the stark realities of statecraft, because there was a full awareness at the absolute highest levels of the American government that these civil defense drills were nothing but window dressing.
They knew it wouldn't work.
Oh, absolutely. It was a massive psychological effort that, as the documentary plainly states, bore almost no relationship to reality whatsoever. The leaders knew the newspaper wouldn't save anyone.
President Eisenhower himself knew it was a complete lie. The transcript includes a private quote from Eisenhower that is just bone-chilling when you compare it to the sunny public defense films.
Oh, the bulldozer quote.
Yeah. He said privately, if nuclear war comes, there aren't going to be enough bulldozers to scrape the bodies off the streets.
That is the grim, unvarnished math of a nuclear exchange right there.
Yeah.
So the obvious question is, why lie to the public? Why push the backyard shelters in the newspapers?
Right. Why bother?
Well, the government understood that to maintain a functioning economy and society in the buildup to a potential war, they had to prevent mass panic.
Okay, that makes sense.
If the public truly grasped that there was zero chance of survival for the vast majority of the population, that no desk or basement would save them, society might have simply collapsed from the anxiety.
People would just give up.
People would stop going to work, factories would halt, everything would grind to a standstill.
So hope, even entirely fabricated, physically impossible hope, became a calculated psychological tool.
Yes.
It was a pacifier, basically. The government needed to keep the defense factories running, keep people paying taxes, and keep the illusion of the pristine 1950s suburb intact while the real preparations for the end of the world were happening in secret underground.
Exactly. It was the deliberate construction of a dual-track reality. The true continuity of the government, the real survival plan, was secured in the bedrock. Meanwhile, the continuity of the society on the surface was maintained entirely through a fiction.
A complete fiction.
The illusion of safety was necessary to fund the reality of the bunker.
Man, it is an incredible, unsettling journey we've taken today in this deep dive.
It really is.
I mean, we started by peeling back the manicured lawn of that 1950s suburb, descending 768 feet past 30-ton glass doors into a spring-loaded subterranean city.
Right?
We looked through the isolating one-way glass of the presidential suite, and we explored the brutal 15-minute math of the Cold War that made continuity of government a grim necessity.
And we also confronted the chilling historical reality that the public's official survival plan was largely a myth designed to manage public psychology.
Yeah, the newspaper.
Which serves as a powerful reminder for us today. Whenever we face modern global crises and receive highly coordinated, reassuring narratives from the top, it is always worth analyzing what the actual data looks like behind closed doors.
Absolutely.
What are the private realities being discussed in the modern war rooms versus the public assurances being broadcast on our screens?
And I think that is the perfect question to leave you with today.
Right.
Because Raven Rock was the physical answer to the physical threat of atomic bombs in the 1950s.
Right.
A mountain to shield against a missile.
Sure.
But the world has evolved. Today, we live in an era of devastating invisible cyber warfare, of rapidly advancing AI threats, and biological weapons that do not announce themselves with a 15-minute warning radar or a giant mushroom cloud.
Exactly. The threats are completely different now.
So what does the modern continuity of government actually look like? What decentralized digital bunkers are being built right now beneath our feet or in the cloud to protect the elite?
It makes you wonder.
And when the next unprecedented crisis hits, what is the modern equivalent of the newspaper we are currently being handed to protect ourselves? Just a little something to mull over the next time you look at a perfectly calm, structured neighborhood.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.